Well, it is the first Sunday of Advent, and Venice, you said senior saints on that postcard. I couldn't read it myself, so I am 43. I am still not yet a senior, but I could not read the Advent Christmas card either. So if you count yourself, we're in the same boat there. Hey, like I mentioned, today is the first Sunday of Advent, and this past week I was in the doctor's appointment. The doctor said, "What do you do for a living?" And pastors, when they're asked that question, they can go one or two routes. Some personality types prefer the more kind of vague route, and they'll say something like, "I'm a spiritual life coach." I prefer the more "here I am, what do you think" approach, where I just say, "I'm a pastor." And then let the silence just go on as long as they want. He said, "Oh, yeah, well, is it a busy time of the year?" I said, "Have you heard of Christmas before?" He said, "Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that one." I said, "In fact, this coming Sunday is the first Sunday of Advent." And he said, "Oh, yeah, like chocolates and calendars, right? Am I right?" And I said, yeah. And I pointed to his diploma. I said, "And that's what you get when you figure out all the hard puzzles, right?" In my head, it was funny. I didn't say it actually to him. I wanted to say it, but I'm too kind. Well, Advent literally means approach or coming. And so during the Advent season, we step into the shoes of the Old Testament people who longed for the approach or coming of the Messiah. This yearning, that looking forward to something that is promised but not yet come. And it's helpful for us to join in with the Old Testament people. It's instructive because we live bombarded by advertisements promising some measure of joy if we just hit purchase, add to cart, purchase. We live bombarded with this. And so Advent schools our longings, focusing them on the thing that our heart truly longs for. But there's a second element to Advent. It's not that we just simply partner or join in the shoes of the Old Testament people, but that we also are aware that we still, as the New Testament people of God, look forward to a second approach or a second coming, where Jesus Christ comes and makes all things new, righting every wrong and drying every tear, and finally doing away with death itself. We look forward to that now. And so Advent is a time where, as I've mentioned, it schools, it trains our longings to desire the thing that at the core of who we are, we desire. And our Advent series we're calling it Rejoice, Rejoice. Have you ever had to tell yourself rejoice a second time? Sometimes in the Psalms, it'll say, there's the Psalms the psalmist is instructing their heart, "Oh, my soul, rejoice. Rejoice," Paul says twice, "rejoice, rejoice." We're recognizing that in this season, whether it is challenges in your home or international challenges that you're aware of, national challenges, regional challenges, sometimes we need that second command to rejoice. And Advent is a time where we can remind ourselves twice of the call to rejoice, because we wait, but it is promised. So we're in Isaiah throughout Advent as we join in the prophecies about the Messiah, turning our eyes towards the coming of Jesus in the manger. And it begins, we're going to be in Isaiah chapter 2, verses 1 to 5. We'll have it on the screens, and it starts like this. "This is what Isaiah, son of Amoz, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In the last days, the mountain of the Lord's temple will be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. Many peoples will come and say, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the temple of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths. The law will go out from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge between the nations and will settle disputes for many peoples. They will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord." Today's passage begins with this simple statement. This is what Isaiah saw. Now, this, easily passed over, is something of significance. Isaiah didn't just have a to-do list dropped down on him by God. He didn't have an instruction manual dropped down on him by God. He had a picture given to him. An image was displayed on his mental and his imagination. A picture, a portrait was given to him. God could have offered words, but he painted a picture for Isaiah. This is important because, as many know, a picture has a way of hitting the heart that words don't. A picture has a way of actually communicating more often than words do. I'm a big fan of words, but there's something about it. For instance, consider these words, war-ravaged city. Now consider this image. Present-day Gaza. If you're like me, the image does something that the words don't. And in fact, there's science behind it. People that study the brain note that an image can travel into our ability to synthesize and organize and understand 60,000 times faster than words do. And there's a universality to it, whereas words sometimes are in different languages, or there are words that we don't understand that we have to look up or try to understand by context, or just pretend that we understand so that we can seem smart and have some measure of accomplishment. Images, we can just see it, and all of a sudden it hits. It could be a smile from somebody that looks completely different from us, but we feel the smile when we see the smile, or when we see the tears, or we see, in this case, the boy looking on just at the rubble with his bike, with who knows what's in those bags. There's a message communicated there that words reach to convey, but don't. Advertisers know this. This is why if you open a magazine or a shopping catalog, if any company still sends out shopping catalogs, there are not many words, just enough words as you need. Why? Because they want to reach for your heart to get you to buy. And they know words have a limited ability to do that. Put the pictures there, give the images. I remember when I was just moved to Tacoma, I was looking for people to connect with, and I connected with a guy on a running app called Strava. I know, it sounds a little funny, but we found ourselves running together, having not met before, and I asked the normal stuff, "Hey, what do you do for fun?" He said he hikes. And I said, "Well, okay, have you heard of Mount Si?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, that thing." And I could tell that this guy was kind of a serious hiker. I asked him, "What is your favorite hike?" He said, "Rainier." And I said, "Oh, cool, you've summited Rainier." He goes, "Bryan, I've done it just over 400 times. I know, a little flex on his part. I said, "Well, you must have done some other hiking too. What's been your favorite hike?" And he said, "Well, I spent about 2 months in Nepal, and it was a great time." And I said, "I need some clarity. Do you mean you hiked up or climbed, I guess, Everest?" He goes, "Yeah, I've climbed Everest twice." And I said, "Why? Why would you do that?" We went on talking, and he made this connection all the way back to his boyhood. He discovered his father's National Geographic that had a story, was doing a story on the Himalayas. And he took down all his baseball posters on his wall and tore his father's National Geographic to shreds and put all those pictures on his wall. The image captured his heart and made him a climber at his boyhood. Images have this power. But today we're looking at a God-revealed image to Isaiah. A God-revealed picture. Two actually. The first is of a tall mountain, and the second is of a wise and righteous judge. And for Isaiah, these images were so important, he had to transcribe them onto written form so that he could pass them on, because they summed up and communicated the very heart of God for Israel, but not just Israel, for the entire world. First, the mountain. The mountain. Here's a picture of Everest, what my friend has climbed. I don't know which one Everest is. Admittedly, I think it's the tallest one. Because it's the tallest mountain. Have you ever been driving on 16, if you're familiar with the area, and the clouds somehow are not in the air, and you see Mount Rainier and you like almost get in a wreck? What is it? I mean, mountains, you and I know, they're just rock and glacier. But there is something that's captivating, that's majestic, that hits at the heart and gives us something, just all makes me want to worship God. You know, in the ancient world, they believed that their God, an ancient people, their God lived on mountains, lived on the top of the mountains. And this is interesting, because when you read this passage, that this portrait that God gave Israel, he says, the mountain of the Lord's temple would be established as the highest of the mountains. It will be exalted above the hills, and all the nations will stream to it. You see, there are the same idea is actually true in Scripture. Ezekiel, Old Testament prophet, says that Eden was on a mountain, interestingly. And then there's Mount Moriah, which is the place where Abraham almost sacrificed his son. And there's Zion, where God, Mount Sinai, where God gave Israel the law. There's this series of things where God shows up on a mountain. And here, God is saying to Isaiah, or painting this picture, he's saying there will be a day where all the small g gods, all the philosophies, all the other world religions, they'll be like hills compared to the true God. And they'll all be bowing towards the one who alone is worthy of praise. And Isaiah gets this picture of this being the case. At the end of time, that the mountain, it's like almost like the presence of God is like a mountain. And what he sees is that there's all these people streaming up to it. And the Hebrew word there is like rivering. They're flowing uphill. And the image is supposed to be counterintuitive, because rivers don't flow uphill. And somebody told me afterwards, after the 10 o'clock, they said, I actually know of a river that flows uphill. And I said, great. I don't think Isaiah did. It's counterintuitive. Here's why. Because in the ancient world, with Israel, they were enemies with all the other nations. In fact, they were at this point captive by an antagonistic nation in captivity, in exile. This is where Isaiah gives the prophecy, in Babylon. And so all the nations were seen as threats to them. But here we have this beautiful painting that God gives Isaiah of this mountain where God's presence dwells, and there's this river of all types of people flowing uphill, counterintuitively moving uphill, being drawn, being summoned to the presence of God. Every type of person, every language, every ethnicity, every culture, every. This is what Isaiah sees. And I'm here for it. I think it's beautiful. This is a picture of what will be when the Messiah comes. And then as this develops, there's a picture of the righteous judge. So it moves from this tall mountain to the righteous judge. I couldn't find an image of a righteous judge that actually worked. A lot of people with gavels just didn't communicate what Isaiah is going for here. You see, judgment in the biblical way of understanding it does not mean condemnation. It means like the one who is not biased, who does not have prejudice, seeing accurately and deliberating on situations that need someone to deliberate upon. In fact, it's very connected to the biblical idea of shalom. Shalom meaning peace, but not just the absence of war, but this sense of peace that means total, complete, flourishing, this type of peace that everybody is becoming more and more whole, that the bully is sitting with the nerd at the junior high lunch table, that the poor and the rich are finding ways to equalize their resources so that there is no inequity. That's the type of shalom that is imaged in the Old Testament, and the shalom that is prophesied, that is a part of God's future kingdom. It requires a righteous judge to make decisions and to arbitrate and to see clearly and to decide. The biblical vision of shalom is not like a whole bunch of people holding hands and like, oh, if we can try, if we just grit our teeth and try really hard, maybe we can make it happen. There is no simply manifesting shalom in the biblical understanding. It requires one who is righteous, who can see without bias, without brokenness, what is true and needs to be enacted upon. And Isaiah gets this picture of this righteous judge. He says, he will teach us his ways. He imagines a certain person, the Messiah. He will teach us his ways so that we may walk in his paths, so that we might finally have clarity about the nature of God and how we can follow him. The law will go out, it'll flow out from Zion, the word of the Lord to Jerusalem. And then it continues on. It says, they will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. You know what a plowshare is? A plowshare is an agricultural tool that has this little point to it, and it has these two handles, and you drive it there. Sometimes it's led by an ox or a donkey. I'm not too familiar with plowshares, guys. Hadn't had a lot of use to them, but I've done the research, so you're welcome. And the idea is that it breaks up the hard ground. You see what Isaiah sees here? He sees weapons of war, spears and swords, being turned into things that can facilitate fruitfulness. Why would that happen? Because they're not needed anymore. Nation, he says, will not take up sword against nation, nor will they train for war anymore. That is important, because when you're not training for war anymore, it means you're not even afraid that there might be a need for war sometime in the future. So you don't need boot camp and you don't need an army, because you anticipate peace. You don't anticipate violence. You don't anticipate antagonism. You anticipate shalom. And Isaiah is saying this is what happens when the righteous judge comes. You know, it's interesting, this passage has shown up in the lyrics of the metal band Megadeth and the pop star Michael Jackson. I mean, when you have that type of wit, it says something about the appeal. The passage has been quoted by presidents from Richard Nixon to Jimmy Carter. What does that mean? It reveals something about our desire. And it reveals something about not even just the desire of people that are followers of Jesus, but the desire of every single person. That we actually desire what God tells Isaiah will happen. That there is something in the human heart that yearns for the day when all swords will be turned into plowshares and all spears into pruning hooks, and there will not be the need for war anymore. It is in our heart. Here's the good news. It is also clearly in the heart of God. God opens his heart to Isaiah and say, this will come when the Messiah comes. And it keeps resonating with us. But it's there's this conflicted thing. Like you and I think if we're honest, we desire that. We desire it on the international level. Let there be no more wars in Ukraine, in Gaza, in Sudan, in Ethiopia, in every place that you and I don't even know there's about to be a war broken out. Let there be peace there. But we desire it on it national level. Let there be no division. Let there be no more antagonism. We desire it on a local level. We desire it on a family level. We desire it. It is in our heart. Yet, how difficult is it to walk the path of peace in our homes, in our cities, in our workplaces? So there's an interesting example of, there's a sculpture that was based on this passage of scripture. Here it is, this muscular guy, strong glutes. Ladies, don't expect this of your husband. This is a sculpture. It was made by a Soviet sculptor in the height of the Cold War. You guys remember the Cold War? When the USSR and the United States were trying to outdo each other with how many nuclear weapons they could have. It was a scary time, my parents tell me. So it was in the height of the Cold War, this Soviet sculptor who had become famous in the USSR for making sculptures demonstrating the victories of the USSR, the military victories of the USSR. Here he makes a statue of peace and gives it to the United States. But what's interesting was that this guy, because of his history of being in the USSR and making all these propaganda statues for the USSR, and now giving it in the height of in the Cold War to the United States, many in the US didn't even want to receive it. They saw it as a political ploy that was meant to bend them down so that they could get beaten. I see in here just the irony that you and I experience on a daily level. We hunger for peace, but we are skeptical of offers of peace because of a history of war. This is the husband that tries to reconcile with his spouse, but his wife, but the wife has so much resentment she doesn't even want to reconcile, and so they are at loggerheads. Or the coworker that steals the idea from the other coworker and recognizes her folly and tries to make amends, but the resentment again has created a wall with no door, even while both parties recognize that peace is the preferable way forward. They cannot find it. Do you know, right now there's enough resources in the world to stop hunger. But yet we prefer spending the money on bigger and stronger militaries. Now, this is not a political statement. Please don't hear that. That's not the point. I just want to needle at and really get at this weird, conflicted state that we live in, where we desire peace, but we don't know how to practice it. You know, Time magazine had a project where they documented 100 most important photographs in the last 100 years. And I was thinking, guys, this shows something about who I am. I was thinking Michael Jordan free throw line, tongue out, just like that. Like exactly, yeah, perfect. That was perfect, right? That's what I was thinking. There was no Taylor Swift, there was no Michael Jordan, there was no John Wayne, there was no Marilyn Monroe. What there was striking. Again, these are the 100 most important photographs in the last 100 years. What there was Elizabeth Eckford. You might not even know her name. One of the Little Rock Nine, walking stoically through a sea of racial animus in 1957, 3 years after the ruling of Brown versus Board of Education. The sharp end of the spear moving, breaking apart segregation. That picture was in the top 100. And there's Tank Man. Maybe you're familiar with that. Maybe some of you are going to Google it right now. In 1989, after a bloody crackdown on pro-democracy protests in Tiananmen Square, one man with what seemed to be carrying groceries walked across the street and stood in front of a tank, daring the tank to come any farther, showing his resistance with his very body. That picture was one of the 100. There were starving Somali children, Vietnam war shots, Japanese tidal wave, the wreckage after Haiti's 2010 earthquake, 9/11, ISIS, World War II, Dr. King in the middle of his I Have a Dream speech, Hitler being apprehended, Gandhi weaving a thread as a symbol of resistance to colonization. What we see, what we survey over human history, what is remembered is the complete absence of what Isaiah saw. Full-on destruction and war, and a glimpse of what Isaiah saw, some hope for peace. What is remembered in our cultural memory? What is held to? What is deemed as important? Sports are fantastic, but they do not count in the grand history of what is held and celebrated or pointed to as some type of warning that should never happen again. What we long for, what humans have longed for, is what Isaiah saw. Swords being beat down into pruning hooks. Spears being beaten into pruning hooks. Swords into plowshares. A hunger for a world made right. We crave the one who has the keys to death and Hades. The one who has the power to forgive. The one who has the power to facilitate reconciliation on the family level, on the city level, on the national level, on the international level. We crave this. We crave what Jesus has the power to do. The coming of the righteous judge is the messianic hope that Isaiah carried that culminates in the birth of Jesus Christ in a manger. Now, we have done such a good job of trying to Thomas Kincaid the manger up. We make it seem nice and serene. Oh, silent night. That thing wasn't silent, ladies and gentlemen. There was no silence there. We're talking about Mary, who had endured social shame because she had bared a child out of wedlock, and Joseph, who almost divorced her, and then they, as a holy family, had to leave in the night, having refugee status on the way out of town. This is some very charged stuff. You cannot put the pastel coloring around the edges to kind of soften it up. This is real deal stuff. And this is not Ricky Bobby 8 ounce, 6 ounce. We try to make it a comedy or a fantasy where it is gritty and real. The Messiah came into the war-torn world we know all too well. There's a shadow of the cross cast over the manger. Because the wise and just ruler, when he stepped into the world, he gave up his heavenly robes as he stepped into a hard, peace-forgetful planet. But that was not the cute, delicate coming of a sweet little boy. It was Inauguration Day. The Inauguration Day, not of some president that has promises that can't deliver on them, but of the one and true King. You know, in medieval sculptures, there is oftentimes the Christ child will hold a globe and it has a cross on top. And the idea being that even the very child, the Christ child can carry the entire world. If you go to Rockefeller Avenue in Manhattan, on one side of the street, you might see Atlas as he's carrying the weight of the world. It's a sculpture symbolizing kind of human strength, the mythological concept that connotes human strength. But if you walk across the street into St. Patrick's Cathedral and go through the sanctuary to the end, you'll see the Christ child holding the world. And we're given this path. What do we want? Do we want to try to demonstrate our prowess and strength and carry the weight of the world, a weight we can't carry? Or do we surrender to the one who as a child could hold all things together? Come, thou long expected Jesus, born to set thy people free, born your people to deliver, born a child and a king. Inauguration Day, we live in the wake of Inauguration Day. Christ has come, but we await the coronation day. The second coming of Jesus Christ is not for weird end-time speculators that try to make some type of little chart and deduce the exact date and time where he might return. That's not what the Bible has in mind. The Bible has in mind awakening the longing that is in the human heart for the one that made them and saves them. We just need to surrender ourselves to him, awakening that longing for him to come again. Revelation 21 verses 4 and 5 says, behold, he will wipe away every last tear. He knows about those last tears you cried a week ago and how they couldn't stop, and they only stopped because there was no more there. He knows about those tears. He will wipe them away. He says there will be no more death. There will be no more killing. There'll be no more. It's going to be gone. The longing for the second coming of Christ is about what every human heart desires, the desire of nations, to use the language from Isaiah. And we have a glimpse of it here in this statue, just a little glimpse of it. This is a statue called the Tree of Life, and it's in the London Museum of Art. The Tree of Life is talked about in Revelation, and it says that the leaves from the Tree of Life will be for the healing of the nations. And I think about all the pain and trauma the nations have endured. Kidnapping, captivity, war, bombing, genocide, famine, hunger, all form of isms imposed on a people. And Revelation says the leaves of the tree will be for the healing of the nations. There is a tree next to a river in the heavenly city which holds all the capacity for healing of all the trauma that every nation has endured. This is what Advent is about, looking forward to that day where we will see that tree. This is a sculpture of it, but there's more to it than you can see at the surface. You see, it's made by a Mozambique sculptor, and it is composed of decommissioned landmines and grenades and guns and bullets and artillery shells from civil wars his country has endured. And together he forms these pieces that were aimed at death, constructing them into something that suggests future hope. And think about your life, your pains, the pain you've caused others. God somehow will put it all together in the end. It was never part of his plan, but he composes it into something beautiful. And we all long for the day when that comes. You know, sermons oftentimes have, this is how you should then live. This is what you do. And sometimes a whole sermon is about how you should do different things, how your marriage should be better because you do this or that, and how you spend money better because of this and that. That's fine. But most of what I've tried to do today is just tell you about what Isaiah saw. Because I believe that when you see what Isaiah saw, just a glimpse of what Isaiah saw, it will change your life. It will grab a hold of something deep within you and charge your imagination in a different direction. But he does give us these two lines at the end. He says, "Come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord." God gave Isaiah this picture, and then the little ending is, so let us walk in light of this. The word light is dawn. Come, let us walk in the dawn of the Lord. Let us walk in the moment where there's enough light to see, but there's still plenty of darkness in the world. Let us walk in this place where we can find our way. We can see the light, but it's not fully there. There's still darkness. This morning I woke up and it was the first frost as far as I knew. And I took a picture of it, first frost, because I was remembering the Chronicles of Narnia when there's still snow on the ground, but Aslan is on the move. And so the snow starts to melt away. They're in the in-between time where the snow is on the ground and it hasn't melted away, but Aslan's on the move. The dawn is here, but it is still darkness. Walk in the dawn of the Lord. Let your life align with what he has said right now. That means this. It means that we, in a way, you might be a military and that's fine, but we actually, our lives are practicing peace. We practice peace. That's what we practice. We're peace practicers. We practice forgiveness. We practice love. We practice reconciliation. We practice patience. We practice forbearance. We practice suffering. We practice the presence of God. That's what we practice because that's what it means to walk in the dawn of the Lord. And when we practice pointing people towards the presence of God. That's what we practice. Remember, it says all nations are coming to the mountain of the Lord. So what's keeping us from doing it now? Don't be a wall. Don't be a brick. Don't be a tripwire from that person's pathway to the Lord. Be a door, be a pathway, be a sign, be love. Seem to be Jesus to them by the power of your Spirit. Walk in the dawn of the Lord. Walk in the dawn of the Lord. Because all hearts desire and long for the one who can facilitate the final peace, and we're called to live in the already, not yet, between the inauguration and the coronation as ones who have seen what Isaiah saw. Before we go to communion today, we're gonna have a reading and light a candle. And through Advent, we're gonna be lighting candles, moving slowly to Christmas Eve where we light the Christ candle. This is a part of us waiting and training our hearts for what they truly long for. So I'll invite Rachel to lead us in that. After that, move towards the table, move towards prayer.
The light of hope has dawned. This week we light the first candle, the candle of hope. Hope is not wishful thinking or blind optimism. It's confidence that what God has promised, He will fulfill. The prophets looked ahead to a time when God would break into the darkness of this world and bring light to His people. That light has come in Jesus, and it will come again when He returns and makes all things new. Even now, in the waiting and the unknown, we hold fast to this hope. Jesus has come, Jesus is with us, and Jesus will come again. Lamentations 3:21 through 23. Yet this I call to mind, and therefore I have hope. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for His compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness.